Smudging being something that we are very familiar with and comfortable with in the West. In my own family, growing up, I can remember there was a certain uncle that I had who, when we would go fishing, we'd smudge before we fished. And if we didn't catch anything, he'd say, well, I guess we didn't smudge properly or something. It was just sort of like how we lived. It was normal. It was just a part of what we did. That is not the case for so many others. And so when we understand smudging, we have to see it, first of all, as being where it pertains to the people who are participating in it. For those who do so, it is generally able to be understood as a ritual of purification and a ritual of personal preparation for whatever it is that you are about to do. It is meant to be symbolic of trying to restore a sense of equilibrium within yourself by receiving the gifts of the earth, what we traditionally call medicines, the things that are burned, like the sage or the sweetgrass, and then allowing that burning thing to be taken in. You breathe in and you envelop yourself with that smoke so as to demonstrate your efforts at trying to restore your personal equilibrium, restore your own need for personal purification with the gift of creation itself. Right? So while it has certainly a spiritual reality for those who participate in it, you could hardly say that anyone who is smudging is thinking that they're worshiping in that particular moment, because it's certainly not the case that Indigenous people would worship themselves. That is one of the things among that giant category that Indigenous people do share in common, is that understanding of a creator who is honored and worshipped and adored in whatever way you would use language to describe that. And so it's not an act of worship in itself in the first place. Where I struggle with the appropriation of something like smudging into the liturgy is where I'm afraid we are actually working backwards, in a sense, where we would say, oh, well, we want to have an enculturated liturgy so Indigenous people feel more comfortable. So we're going to impose our understanding of what's happening at this moment in the Mass onto your ritual so that it can have a justifiable place in it. So, oh, there's a bowl with smoke coming out of it. Okay, well, we'll replace our thurible with that. Well, that's not what the thurible with smoking incense is meant for when you envelop the sanctuary and the altar or the book of the Gospels or the Holy Eucharist with the smoke of rising incense. That has a completely different meaning. But smoke's coming up out of it. Oh, okay, well, then I guess they're equivalent to each other. I actually think that that's a culturally insensitive thing, because it's a form of imposition where we are ascribing to this thing what we have decided it must mean if we're going to incorporate it into what we're doing. Or we call it a ritual of purification. Oh, okay, well, then we'll replace the penitential act of the Mass with the rite of smudging. Again, I have to ask, does any Indigenous person who smudge believe that their sins have just been forgiven? I don't know that anyone who smudged before they ever received the gospel thought that that's what was happening. So why would now we say we can replace an act that is meant to remind us of the need for penance and confession of our sin, receiving the mercy of God, in order to properly prepare us for right worship? It's, again, a kind of imposition upon it of our own understanding and meaning. And so I'm very sensitive to that expression being appropriated in a manner that I think maybe only makes sense from one direction, and that from the other direction of Indigenous people observing it saying, oh, well, I like smudging, and so I'm happy to see that there's smudging in the Mass. I think both sides end up missing where this meaning is coming from. And so I've seen that done very beautifully at Sacred Heart Church of the First Peoples. People smudge as they're entering the church. Well, now that makes great sense to me. If it's a way of purifying myself, restoring my equilibrium, preparing myself for something, when my parents used to bring me to Mass, they'd walk in, bless themselves with holy water, genuflect, kneel down and pray, and had their hands folded. And that's what we did before Mass. Well, if that means less to you than smudging as you prepare yourself to enter into the church and participate in the Mass, then of course you should smudge, because it's not an act of worship. and it's not inside of the liturgy, but it's accomplishing what we said it's for in the first place. So there's absolutely room for these things, but we need to be mindful of where we are incorporating them and why.
Well, that's very, very well said. The only thing that I'm thinking in addition to that is the profound respect that the Indigenous peoples have for protocol and for ceremony. And that respect expresses itself in accepting the ceremony and the protocol as is and following it. I would be, I'd be shocked if an Indigenous person looking at our ceremony protocol would say, please change it for me. I can't imagine an Indigenous person with such profound respect for protocol asking that of another group. And by the same token, we should make the effort to understand what they mean in their own ceremonies and protocols and respect those. And part of that respect, mutually practiced, is to make sure that we honor each properly, but making sure that they're not in the improper places, if I can put it that way. So thanks everybody for watching. Hope you found it helpful along your journey of faith. Please know that I'm praying for you. And if you would, be so kind as to pray for us also. Every blessing to you. God bless.